The barn-dominium was meant to be one of the proudest accomplishments in fixer-upper history. A forgotten barn turned into a stunning showpiece, the kind of transformation that defined Chip and Joanna's rise. But shortly after the cameras stopped rolling, something surrounding that home began to unravel. What started as a simple renovation quietly grew into a situation that no one on the fixer-upper team ever expected. And the truth behind what happened off-camera nearly changed the future of the entire franchise. When the Corder family introduced Chip and Joanna to the dusty barn on their land in Lacey Lakeview, it immediately felt like classic fixer-upper material. The structure was worn, the interior empty and echoing, and the whole place looked more suited for storage than for living. But that was exactly what made it exciting. Chip loved unusual spaces, and the moment he stepped inside, he began describing how the wide frame and tall ceilings could become something remarkable. Joanna saw the same potential. Instead of updating an existing home, she could build an identity from scratch. From the first walkthrough, the project carried the kind of energy that made the show special. A converted barn was different, visually striking, and guaranteed to stand out from the season's more traditional renovations. The crew felt it too. They had filmed dozens of homes, but few offered the blank slate that the barn-dominium did. Everyone sensed they were working on an episode that would stick with viewers long after it aired. The Corders were friendly and enthusiastic, but their questions were slightly different from the families usually featured on the show. They asked about timelines, layout flexibility, and how the space could function in different ways. It was not concerning enough to raise alarms, but it did give the project a slightly unusual tone compared to the typical forever home stories that Fixer-Upper highlighted. Still, everything during construction moved smoothly. There were no major setbacks, no dramatic surprises, and no tense moments between designers and homeowners. As the barn slowly transformed, it became the kind of build that captured the heart of the show. Inventive design, sentimental storytelling, and a dramatic before and after reveal. When filming wrapped, the barn-dominium looked unlike anything Fixer-Upper had completed before. It blended rustic beams with Joanna's clean, warm style, turning an overlooked structure into a fully realized home. Reveal day felt like a triumph. The family was excited, the episode looked beautiful on camera, and the crew left feeling they had filmed one of the strongest transformations of the season. Everything about the project seemed to confirm why Fixer-Upper had become such a phenomenon. But once filming ended, the real story began. Decisions made after the cameras were gone would soon spark a level of attention no one on the Fixer-Upper team anticipated. Attention that would slowly pull this single renovation into a much larger storm. When the barn-dominium episode aired, viewers immediately treated it as one of Fixer-Upper's standout transformations. The idea of turning a barn into a home felt fresh, and the finished space looked like something out of a magazine. Social media filled with praise for the soaring ceilings, the open layout, and the way Chip and Joanna had blended rustic structure with clean, modern design. For a moment, it seemed like the barn-dominium had become a symbol of everything people loved about the show. But behind the excitement, something unexpected was happening. Fans searching for additional photos or decor inspiration stumbled across an online listing for the barn-dominium, posted almost immediately after the episode aired. It was a short-term rental, complete with the same showcase images featured during the reveal. The listing did not hide its connection to Fixer-Upper. It highlighted the home's appearance on the show and promoted it as a place where guests could stay in the famous barn-dominium. That discovery changed the tone overnight. Viewers began asking whether the Corder family had ever planned to live in the home at all. The episode presented a sentimental transformation, yet the listing made it look like a business venture set in motion before the paint had even dried. Some fans felt misled, and discussions spread quickly across comment sections and home design forums. Then the questions started multiplying. Was Fixer-Upper unintentionally helping investors create high-priced rentals? Were homeowners joining the show with motives that did not match its spirit? And how much control did Magnolia actually have once families took possession of their renovated spaces? Within days, the conversation around the barndominium had shifted entirely. The once beloved episode now carried a tone of suspicion, and online threads turned from celebration to frustration. And while fans were debating the meaning of the rental listing, the people living near the property began raising concerns of their own. Their complaints pushed the situation beyond television and social media, straight into the community where the barndominium sat. As the online backlash gained momentum, the people living near the barndominium were dealing with something more immediate. Cars began showing up on their quiet road, with visitors looking for the famous fixer-upper home. Some stopped to take photos, others stayed for weekend rentals, and neighbors quickly realized the property was drawing far more attention than anyone expected. What had once been a peaceful area now felt unusually busy, and the sudden stream of strangers made longtime residents uneasy. A few neighbors mentioned that the shift happened almost overnight. One week, the barn was under construction, and the next week, it was a recognizable landmark. Visitors often slowed down to stare, sometimes pulling into private driveways by mistake. Once the rental listing went public, the number of unfamiliar vehicles increased. To locals, the barndominium no longer felt like a home someone lived in. It felt like a tourist attraction dropped into the center of their community. Those concerns quickly reached city officials in Lacey Lakeview. The town had zoning rules, but nothing that fully addressed short-term rentals becoming high-traffic destinations. The barndominium highlighted gaps in regulation, and officials began reviewing whether the property complied with existing codes. They also had to consider how this sudden level of attention might affect the broader neighborhood if more homeowners followed the same path. Local media soon picked up the story, framing it not as a neighborhood dispute, but as a side effect of fixer-uppers' massive popularity. Headlines suggested that Magnolia's transformations might unintentionally be creating rental hotspots rather than strengthening communities. That idea spread quickly because it tapped into a growing national conversation about short-term rentals and their impact on residential areas. Within Magnolia, the shift in tone was impossible to ignore. What began as a single online discovery had escalated into a city-level discussion with the show's name at the center. Fans were debating the intentions of homeowners, residents were pushing for answers, and officials were trying to understand how a renovated barn had become a commercial draw. The barndominium was no longer just a charming episode. It had become a problem with legal, social, and public relations implications, one that Magnolia had never faced before. And as all of this unfolded, pressure was building behind closed doors as well. The network, the production team, and Magnolia's own staff were about to get pulled into the growing storm. Inside Magnolia, the barndominium controversy went from background noise to a clear threat. Fixer-Upper's reputation was built on sincerity and community, and suddenly critics were questioning whether the show was being used as a stepping stone for investment properties. Even though Magnolia had not encouraged the rental listing, the public did not separate the homeowners' choices from the Gaines brand. That connection was what worried the team the most. The production staff began reviewing everything: application forms, initial interviews, and their earliest conversations with the courters. Nothing pointed to a deliberate plan to turn the home into a business, yet the questions the family had asked during filming now carried a different weight. What once seemed like practical curiosity began to look more like early hints of alternative intentions. It was not definitive, but it made the team realize how little control they had once a renovation left their hands. HGTV also stepped in. Fixer Upper was one of the network's most valuable series, and anything that threatened its credibility demanded immediate attention. Executives wanted regular updates and asked Magnolia whether changes were needed to prevent similar issues. They pressed for clarity on how homeowners were screened and whether future participants should confirm long-term use of the renovated property. These conversations were not hostile, but they were urgent, and they made it clear that this was not seen as a small misunderstanding. It was a reputational risk. Within Magnolia, opinions differed on how far to go. Some felt stricter requirements could undermine the show's welcoming, family-first tone. Others believed guidelines were necessary to protect Fixer Upper from becoming a magnet for applicants with investment plans. Even minimal changes would alter how the series operated, yet doing nothing felt just as risky. For the first time, the team had to balance creative freedom with the responsibility of managing the show's growing influence. The emotional strain inside Magnolia was real. Chip and Joanna had built their brand on authenticity, and watching viewers question their intentions was deeply unsettling. The situation made clear that Fixer Upper was no longer just a feel-good renovation show. It was a cultural force, with consequences they had not faced before. The barn dominium had exposed a vulnerability they did not realize existed. And just as Magnolia felt they were regaining control of the narrative, the homeowners made a public move that reignited the entire controversy and pushed the situation into even more unpredictable territory. As the controversy grew, the Corder family decided to speak publicly about their decision to list the barn dominium as a short-term rental. Instead of letting Magnolia or HGTV address the situation, they explained directly to reporters that the home was perfect for guests and that opening it to visitors made sense financially. Their comments were straightforward, but they landed poorly with viewers who had just watched an emotional, family-focused episode. To many, the explanation confirmed their fear that the home had never been intended as a long-term residence. Within hours, social media threads filled with frustration. Fans accused the homeowners of using Fixer Upper as a shortcut to create a profitable rental property. The sentimental narrative presented in the episode suddenly felt disconnected from reality. Even people who initially admired the home began questioning whether the show had unintentionally shifted from helping families settle down to helping participants capitalize on Magnolia's brand. Neighbors who had already dealt with increased traffic became more vocal as well. They described visitors parking on narrow roads, taking photos at all hours, and occasionally wandering onto private land while looking for the property. What the Corders saw as harmless tourism, locals experienced as a sudden disruption to their daily lives. Their frustrations added another layer to the growing backlash, making it clear that the barn dominium was affecting far more than online discussion. The media quickly picked up on the tension. Articles framed the barn dominium as part of a broader issue. Popular home renovation shows unintentionally encouraging investment buyers. Headlines suggested that Fixer Upper renovations were becoming prime targets for people hoping to turn unique homes into high-demand rentals. The story spread far beyond Waco, and the barn dominium became a talking point in debates about the impact of short-term rentals across the country. Inside Magnolia, the homeowners' public defense made the situation even more complicated. Their statements created the impression that Magnolia supported or approved of the rental conversion, even though that was not the case. Chip and Joanna could feel the narrative slipping away, and they knew the longer they waited, the more viewers would believe the show was drifting from its core values. It became clear that Magnolia needed to respond decisively. The barn dominium was no longer a single episode gone wrong. It was becoming a symbol of something larger, a warning sign that Fixer Upper's growing influence came with consequences the team could no longer ignore. And the steps Magnolia would take next would permanently reshape how the show operated moving forward. As national attention focused on the barn dominium, Magnolia realized the situation required more than a brief statement. The controversy touched on viewer trust, local community concerns, and the overall image of Fixer Upper. Chip and Joanna addressed the issue publicly, making it clear that the show was designed to help families create homes, not commercial rental properties. Without criticizing the Corders directly, they explained that Magnolia never encouraged participants to turn featured homes into short-term rentals. Behind the scenes, Magnolia began reworking its homeowner selection process. The team reassessed application forms, interview questions, and the criteria used to determine whether a family should be chosen for the show. They paid closer attention to long-term intentions, ensuring that future renovations reflected Fixer Upper's core message of building lasting homes. While Magnolia did not reveal every change publicly, People familiar with the process later confirmed that the screening became significantly more selective. These changes caught the attention of HGTV as well. Executives wanted reassurance that Magnolia was taking steps to avoid similar issues. Discussions between the two sides became more structured, focusing on how to balance creative freedom with the need to protect the show's credibility. Simple guidelines that had worked in the early seasons were no longer enough. Fixer Upper's influence had grown, and the team now had to consider how each renovation might affect both the neighborhood and the broader audience. Meanwhile, the barn-dominium continued attracting interest. When it eventually went to auction, the event drew coverage far beyond Waco. The sale underscored how quickly a single Fixer Upper property could shift from a local renovation project to a national talking point. For Magnolia, it reinforced the need to understand how fame and real estate could collide in ways they never intended. Internally, the entire situation served as a turning point. Fixer Upper was no longer a modest design show filmed in a small Texas town. It had become a cultural phenomenon with ripple effects that reached far beyond a single renovation. The barn-dominium revealed how much responsibility Magnolia carried and how quickly things could spiral if that responsibility was not managed carefully. But the deeper impact was still forming. The emotional strain, the constant public scrutiny, and the growing demands on the Gaines family all began merging with other pressures that had been building quietly behind the scenes. And soon, those combined forces would push Fixer Upper closer to a decision that no one expected. As the barn-dominium controversy settled into public conversation, its deeper effects began to surface inside Magnolia. The uproar had revealed something Chip and Joanna could no longer ignore. Fixer Upper had grown far beyond a simple home renovation show. Every decision carried weight, every misunderstanding could turn into a headline, and every project had the potential to affect not just a neighborhood, but their entire brand. The barn-dominium was not the sole cause of these pressures, but it magnified all of them at once. Even after Magnolia clarified its stance and adjusted its screening process, the emotional toll lingered. The team had spent years cultivating a welcoming image, only to watch one project spark debates about authenticity, community impact, and the motives of participating families. Chip and Joanna felt that weight most of all. What had started as a creative venture in their hometown had grown into something massive, demanding, and increasingly difficult to control. At the same time, their personal and professional responsibilities were expanding rapidly. Magnolia Market was booming. New business ventures were launching, and their family life was becoming harder to balance with the non-stop demands of television production. The barn-dominium situation sharpened the realization that Fixer Upper's success came with expectations they could not always meet. The show no longer felt like a small, local project. It felt like a machine that needed constant attention, constant oversight, and constant management of public perception. HGTV saw the strain as well. Behind closed doors, there were conversations about the long-term direction of the series and whether it was sustainable under the growing pressure. Network executives valued Fixer Upper immensely, but they also understood that a show built on sincerity could not thrive if that sincerity felt compromised. The barn-dominium controversy, though only one issue, symbolized how vulnerable the show had become to factors outside its control. As months passed, Chip and Joanna faced a choice. They could continue the show with tighter guidelines, more oversight, and the constant need to protect every detail from public misinterpretation. Or they could step back, regroup, and regain control of their time, their privacy, and their growing business. The barn-dominium incident was not the only reason they chose the second option, but it played a part in revealing just how fragile the balance had become. When Fixer Upper announced it would end after Season 5, fans were shocked. Many assumed the decision came out of nowhere, but for those who had watched the barn-dominium saga unfold, the signs were already there. The show had reached a point where one home, one misunderstanding, or one unintended consequence could send ripples through everything Magnolia built. And in the end, the barn-dominium stood as the clearest example of how even the most successful television empire can be shaken by a single renovation that went in a direction no one ever planned. The barn-dominium began as one of Fixer Upper's boldest ideas, the kind of transformation that showed what Chip and Joanna could create when given complete freedom. But what happened after filming revealed a different truth, one that had nothing to do with design and everything to do with how a single decision can shift the direction of an entire franchise. The controversy forced Magnolia to rethink its process, exposed the pressure that came with national success, and showed how quickly a beloved show could face challenges it never expected. And in the end, the barn-dominium became a reminder that even one home can change everything.